Good timing. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the live. Today, we're going to be talking about prepping, being prepared for the unknown, and probably good timing actually. We're talking to Rick, and Florida's just been hit by a hurricane. Um, some of these things you can predict, other things you can't so much. Like the weather is not so difficult these days. I suppose you can. But I know tornadoes in America are quite frequent, and they're not always very predictable either. You never know when power is going to go out, storm is going to hit, or something much worse. If you had a look at the thumbnail for this live, that was a photo. It's one of my personal photos from after the earthquake in Japan and tsunami. So these are things that I think that everyone should be prepared for any kind of emergency, whether it be a natural disaster or otherwise. You just never know what's going to happen. And it really doesn't take much to be prepared either, actually. So, but we're going to go around and we'll talk to Rick and Nia and see what they do. And we'll go from there, right? So, how should we kick this off, guys? Rick?
Well, like you said, I live in a dangerous state. We have hurricanes here on maybe every few years. We haven't had one down here since 2017, but other parts of Florida have been hit. So at any time, you could have a catastrophic weather event like we did in 1992, where we had basically homes destroyed, no power for 2 months. It was total chaos. And if you want to survive, you have to have food. The problem is when there's a hurricane, the grocery stores, well, sometimes they'll give the food away. And that's what's happened in a couple of hurricanes, either before the storm or after the storm. Instead of throwing it out, they mark it way down or they give it away. So it's an opportunity to stock up on meat. Back in 2017, when we had Irma coming, they were basically giving away, selling cheap, and I loaded up with as much meat as I could. But then the problem is, if you want to keep that food, you have to be able to preserve it. And the only way you can really preserve food, you could can it or you could keep it frozen. And I mean, yeah, some of the other foods can be fermented. There's actually ways of fermenting certain meats. And if you eat some plant material, you can ferment that. But you really need to practice long before the disaster comes, because the problem is once a disaster hits, that's it. And whenever we have a hurricane warning here, you should see how people run out there. They buy whatever they can get. The gas stations are empty within hours. And that's one of the reasons I keep at least 6 months of fuel in reserve. And that's really my whole thing. And what I try to do, I try to look for things that I can build from stuff that I can find inexpensively. And I look for food and energy sources that I can grab locally if possible. And that's really what my theory is when it comes to getting ready for a disaster.
Yeah. Right, you, Nia?
Yeah, I'm right there with you, and I've kind of always had a relatively, a mindset that's been in the field, I guess, sort of preparedness, because I think even looking back ancestrally or primally, we would have had that sort of mentality, right, of stocking up for the lean times, or if possible, or thinking ahead in terms of being able to see what weather patterns were coming, and when to move and when to stay and all that kind of stuff. So like, I think there's a real natural component to being prepared. And I think sometimes in today's world, it gets like everything else. It's like all about sort of fear mongering and, the zombie apocalypse and stuff. So what I would really start out by saying is just that I think it's part of a healthy, normal human mindset to think about being prepared for things, because no matter where you live, there's different types of natural disasters that can happen. Even over the last few years, we saw people lost their jobs unexpectedly. There were changes going on that we can't always predict. And so let's say, hey, you lose your job or you get laid off or something like that happens for whatever reason. Do you have some stuff stocked up so maybe you could coast and not go grocery shopping for a month or something like that? So there's all different kinds of reasons why being prepared is important. And so now really what I've tried to do from the perspective of being carnivore is obviously look at stocking up on food that I could still eat and my family could still eat and still maintain our health status during an emergency, because you could store a bunch of beans and rice, and we have rice and stuff stocked up too, but you know, ideally we're going to want to remain healthy, remain symptom free if we're battling, you know, any kind of chronic disease or disease in general, so that we can stay vigilant and make good decisions under a time when probably everything else is stressful, right? And so the last thing you want to have to worry about are your basic needs and feeling healthy in general, right? When you've got a lot of maybe chaos going on or things are just much different than they are normally day to day. So I think about all of that. And I try to find different ways to preserve meat or keep lots of meat on hand. So I recently just published a video showing, you know, some new canned food items that are 100% meat. Basically, they got a few preservatives in them, but some good options that I stock up on whenever I see them on sale. I try to pick up, you know, $20 to $50 worth if I have that in my budget, and keep that on hand. And then probably my favorite way to preserve meat is dehydrating. So I love my dehydrator. I love making jerky, and then I just vacuum seal that stuff. And I've started throwing them in the freezer now, because if I put them in dry storage, they get eaten. Or the one vacuum sealed jerky I saved for several months ended up growing a little bit of mold. So I thought, well, I didn't either crisp it up to death, you know, dehydrated it enough, and obviously there's no preservatives in it. So I started dehydrating them, vacuum sealing, and then throwing them in the freezer, so that they are sure to stay, you know, good for long term. And then, you know, they're in these little skin packs. They're easy to, you know, throw in a bag if you want to keep like a backpack or a bag in your car. I know, like for here, it gets really hot in the summer, so I like to keep emergency supplies in my vehicle as well, in case we were to get stranded and it's hot, you know, extra water, a few, you know, like a bag of jerky or some canned food or something like that. Change of socks, change of shoes, hat, sunglasses, things like that you might need, umbrella to keep out of the sun. But if you live in a cold climate, it's good to have a winter, you know, version of that too, in case you get stranded somewhere. So there's all these little things that you can do to just keep yourself in like a more of a peace of mind state, right? Because you're not worried about, oh, if I get stranded, I'm screwed. I've got nothing. You know, at least you've got a little bit of something to have that kind of safety blanket. So that's kind of my initial thoughts.
Yeah. No, that's great. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, being prepared is, I mean, I always keep like, for getting away, I mean, I do have a place to go while I'm here. I can go out to the countryside. So I've got things out there as well. I keep at my dad's place. But, yeah, another thing to another way to stay prepared too is keeping a full tank of gas in your car. Like I always make sure my car is always full, so that I can, if I do need to leave home, then I can, sort of thing. So, but that's just one of my routine things as well. Plus, it was like Rick was saying, you know, after whenever an event happens, whenever sort of like a hurricane or whatever happens, you know, gas stations that, you know, people panic buy. You know, they panic buy. They go out, they start looting, or they start buying as much as they can, and you know, like gas stations will be one of the first places that will just be drained. They will be empty as, and so it's really good to have a good supply of fuel if you can store it like Rick does. That would be brilliant. But yeah, there's all sorts of things and routines that are really handy, and keeping a backpack in your car is a good idea too, actually. What about okay, so freezing food is great if you can keep the power on, and if you have a freezer and so on and so on. What do you do for if you can't keep it stored though? Do you have backup? Do you guys have backup? I like to keep tin meats as well. I keep a lot of tin meats, so like tin chicken, tin. I mean, it's not stuff that I would eat regularly, but in the case of an emergency, it'll keep your ribs apart. So pretty much it'll whatever you can store long term and can still maintain your health, then that is something that you might want to look at. Tin fish, I find, is really good actually, because for one, it's full of omega-3s, but you can usually buy it stored in just spring water and no other added ingredients and things like that. So whereas other tin meats usually have quite a few sort of added stuff that you don't really want. But tin fish I find to be the best. But you can also get like tin beef and like corned beef and tin chicken and things like that as well. So yeah, like that, Rick. Yeah.
Yep. And sardines. I mean, if you can get sardines on sale, they're a good survival food. But most of my canned food I make myself. I get like ground beef and I'll put it in these jars, with the lids on them, the ball jars. I have several of these that are stored away. And I always try to keep about maybe 10 pounds of canned meat because you never know when you're going to need it. So that does come in handy.
Yeah, definitely. Another thing actually is like camping gear. Camping gear actually, this is something that actually became very popular in Japan after the earthquake and tsunami that hit us. Camping gear became very popular afterwards when things got sort of back to normal. But you'd be surprised, like even if you don't like camping, the equipment is very handy. For one, if you need something to cook on, you don't have power. Two, it can be shelter too if you need it, but also hunting equipment, and it could be just as simple as fishing gear. Fishing gear, so you can go and catch your own fish. And Rick, he even hunts his own iguana and things like that too. So be prepared to. I mean, if you don't know how long these sort of things will last, and for a lot of them can last quite a long time. Like when I was going through the earthquake period, we had to go out on bicycles every single day and try and find food that we could buy from people who would from stores that would sell it out in the car park cheap, sort of thing, and we had to buy it for other people as well. So it's kind of if you can go fishing, if you can go hunting or something like that, it's going to make it a lot easier for you to find fresh, healthy food, and you can replenish your food supplies. So it's not something you should sort of wait for the disaster and then go out and see what you can get, sort of thing, There's a great question here. That what are your top 10 must-haves? How about you, Rick?
Top 10 must-haves. Well, I don't know if there's 10 of them. I guess let me think of what I have, and then we'll count and see how many there are. First of all, you need energy. The most important thing is going to be energy. Now, if you have utility power, you need a generator. You absolutely have to have a generator. Now, if you don't have a lot of power needs, you could get away with the solar setup where you have solar panels and you could go ahead and use battery storage. You might be able to preserve some of your food if you just have one freezer or something like that. But for a quality experience, you're going to need at least, I would say, a 6 kW rated generator. You can get by with that, but if you could get a 12K or more, it's better. Anything over 20K would be a problem because it takes too much fuel. So you're going to have to balance your needs with the energy that you have. If you have a gasoline generator, you're going to need to store gasoline. But one of those generators can burn a gallon of gas every 2 to 3 hours. So you may have to run the generator for a period of time and then shut it off, just enough to maintain your refrigerator or freezer. So definitely whatever fuel you're using, diesel, gas, or if you're like me and you have a wood power generator, you don't have to worry about it because after the hurricane, there's going to be plenty of wood free for the taking. Another thing that you really need to have would be first aid supplies, bandages, or anything else that you would need in case you become injured, maybe some ointments or antibiotics or iodine or whatever you normally use. Because if you have a disaster, your chance of being hurt is pretty high. Even if you're not trying to. I mean, if you during a storm, your house could collapse. There could be civil unrest, and you could have cuts from broken glass or whatever. So having some type of first aid supplies is important. Now, obviously, for everybody, you need food. So you're going to have a food source. If you're a carnivore like us, you need to have meat and some way of storing eggs. Now, you could dehydrate eggs, or you could go ahead and freeze them. It is possible to freeze eggs, although it's a little tricky at times. But you do need food. But again, if you're going to have anything that's frozen, you need to have an energy source to keep it going. Depending also on where you live. If you live in a place that's prone to flooding, you're either going to have to evacuate, or you're going to have sandbags or some other type of tarps or something like that to protect what you have. I tend to keep tarps to cover my roof in case it gets damaged. I have about 4 of them that they're about 50 by 80, big old tarps, and I keep them in storage. So I have that. And I also have just some building materials. I have pieces of wood, I have nails, I have all the things to do quick repairs in case the house gets damaged. I have a chainsaw and fuel and oil for that. Very important when you have a hurricane. Now, I'm a little more extreme because I also have a bobcat and a couple of other pieces of equipment. But if you have vehicles or equipment, my recommendation is also have some motor oil extra, have extra oil filters, because it could be a while before things get back to normal, and you don't want to risk destroying your engine because you're running around with old oil, or maybe you had a leak and you couldn't fill it up and the auto parts was destroyed. So I do have that. And then you want to have basic cleaning supplies. You want to make enough soap so you can take a bath. It's very important to have some type of hygiene. Otherwise, you're going to have more issues. And if you buy soap, you might want to stock up on that. If you make your own soap, you want to make sure you have plenty of lye or washing soda, depending on how you do it. And if you just use regular detergent, make sure you have enough of that to keep your dishes washed. And if you live in a hot climate like I do, and you don't have enough power to run your air conditioner, get some fans or get something where you'll be able to sleep, because trying to sleep in hot weather is impossible unless you have some type of cooling system. So you're going to need to have that. And if you don't have a generator that's enough to run your home, get some emergency lighting. Some people use candles and some people use lanterns, but in a hot climate like Florida, that's a bad idea. And they need a lot of maintenance, and they can also break and cause fires. But in today's world, thankfully, we have all kinds of LED lights and rechargeable batteries. And you can have a basic solar setup, some little 50 watt or 100 watt solar setup, and charge all these things up. Now, if you have a cell phone, make sure that you have a way to charge that. It may be a while before the tower is active, but you want it to be there if it is. And really, when it comes down to it, just whatever supplies you use on a normal basis. I like to have wires and connectors and solder and plumbing fittings and all these things, because another thing that I do after a storm, I do work for other people. So I like to stock up. I like to be like my own hardware store, because a lot of times I can solve other people's problems. Also, some of my friends that may need supplies, I make sure that I have that. I even have my own ice machine that runs off the generator. So people that I know that need ice, they can come and get it. But again, it depends on what kind of network you have. If you live, let's say, in an apartment, your preparations are going to be very different than, let's say, if you're a farmer. So the more space that you have, the more options that you have. A bit of advice that I give everybody: if you're going to prep, you need to practice. Don't wait until the disaster hits, because you don't know what you're going to need. So when you have some time, maybe you have time off from work, I would recommend just turning off your electricity and just pretending like you had a disaster. It was grid down or hurricane or whatever. And then see what you need and see what kind of problems you run into. and just try it. And that's the best thing you can do, because, preparation, when you're talking about prepping, you need to practice too. Because if you don't practice, you're going to be surprised. You would be amazed at how many things you take for granted that you don't think about until you really need them. So
Yeah.
I don't know if that was 10 things, but I can tell you that's the way that I think. And
Yeah.
it seems to work, because I've been through several disasters and I've always come through pretty much better than anybody else. Everybody else I know suffered, and I was the only one that was able to go after hurricane and live the exact same life that I was living before. So, but again, that's my advice.
Yeah. No, great advice though. These were things that, I think it was lucky for me. I think that we were in Japan, things were a little bit easier, but when we were going through the quake and tsunami time, we had to try and find all this sort of stuff, like every day sort of thing. We had to carry water for flushing toilets and all that sort of stuff. So another thing I would add to that would be your health. Your health is preparing for the unexpected as well. Being fit and healthy. Being able, because you need to be able to move. Especially if in some situations you may not have a choice, so you may have to relocate, and you may have to go out and find your own food and things like that. So being, for us, carnivore is great, but for anyone in general, just being healthy, being fit, this is preparing for these sort of situations as well. I would say that, first aid kits are an absolute must, because like Rick said, there's just absolutely, you don't know what's going to happen. For my situation at the time, it was a 9 magnitude earthquake, plus the aftershocks. So there were over 8, some of them, and 7 was an average. So things falling on you, glass breaking around you, all sorts of things can happen. So being prepared with a first aid kit is going to, and I think the more equipped the first aid kit, the better off you're going to be, because you just don't know what the situation is going to be. So don't shy away from buying a heap of bandages and things like that. And making sure you look after your car as well. I always keep spare oil and filter for my car, just in case. It's, like Rick said, you don't know how long these things last. Some of them last a very long time. A good tip for hygiene, though, is it's maybe not as healthy as having soap tallow and things like that, but sanitary wipes, as alcohol wipes, they store for a very, very long time. So you can just buy a heap of them once and just keep them for years. Okay, so these are things that will store for a long time without going off, without taking up too much space as well. So, like packets of sanitary wipes, we keep a lot of that sort of stuff on hand. And they're also very handy for if you don't have a water supply. Like after the quake, we didn't have a water supply. Luckily, it was cold, but depending on where you are, you may not have an opportunity to have a shower or have a bath or whatever, or clean yourself. So wipes can also be very good, very handy for that. Okay. And like these days too, lighting, you can get like very, very cheap solar lights, like just little LED solar lights you can pick up from a hardware store, and just keep them in storage. That you'd be surprised, a little bit of light at night when you need it can make a very big difference. But apart from that, honestly, I really didn't mind not having electricity, because it sort of took away a lot of other problems as well. Like people weren't able to get in contact. You didn't have to worry too much. You didn't watch TV and things like that. So I really didn't mind not going without power for a while.
It depends on where you live, because in Florida, going without power is extremely unpleasant. Another thing
Yeah.
that I do, I still have my CB radios, and I have a couple of friends that use them. So if the cell phone goes down, at least we have some primitive communication.
That's good.
That's
Yeah.
kind of handy.
But another good thing, like you mentioned, Rick, is a network. You know, that
Yeah.
was one thing that kept us going too, is that we would meet with friends and we'd sort of, think they could sometimes find things that we couldn't and vice
Hmm.
versa. And so we sort of swap things around and things
Right.
that we could use and things like that. So it's really good to have a network of friends
Hmm.
that who may be in the same situation, and they can, they have the opportunity to get to things that you don't. So it's
Well, that's one thing that I've experienced because I'm known as sort of the MacGyver or the one that can make things happen. And a lot of times, people that I know, they'll find stuff. Oh, can you use this? Can you use that? And a lot of times, I can put things together. I tell them, look, I need this to make this. For example, my friend was having a hard time because they had no hot water. And we do have
yeah,
well water here, so you got water to take a bath, but it was cold water. So I rigged up a water heater. I just got
yeah,
some copper coil and I got the barbecue grill and I stuck it inside the barbecue and they had hot water. So they were super happy. His wife was complaining how cold the water was. I said, don't worry, that's easy to fix. In my house, I get hot water from the generator. It wraps around the exhaust. And when that thing heats up, it makes plenty of hot water.
yeah.
So
That's
when
good.
I'm see like right now, I'm running with my incandescent lights and my air conditioner and all that. If we had a hurricane and we lost power, it would be exactly the same. My life
Mm,
would not change one bit. The only difference is I have to go out there and tend the generator. And this is why it's so important to have extra oil because every generator has a different schedule. And maybe every few hours you might have to change the oil. On a big generator like I have, it would be 500 hours. But still, you need to have that plus the filter. So if you can maintain this equipment, and again, if you have a network of friends, I have other friends that have generators and they have supplies. But what happens if it breaks or it doesn't start and they can't get it going? Well, they call me. And like I
yeah.
said, if the cell phones don't work, we do have a makeshift Wi-Fi that we can set up. They're within 2-3 miles, and I have dish antennas and Yagai antennas, and I have a large tree with a tower on it, so I can have the Wi-Fi set up within 2 or 3 hours. But the CB radio, that's an instant way of getting communications, and I keep telling them make sure the CB is functioning, because even though it's old technology, it still works. And even walkie-talkies, if you have them, get a couple sets, because if you have a
That's good.
family, that can really help when they're out. Maybe your kids are out or something, or one of your friends, and they're looking around. That's a good way, because remember, when a disaster comes, let's say we have an EMP, and that's a possibility, or a solar flare,
Mm,
communication network is going to be totally dead. So how are you going to
mm,
communicate? Well, I mean, you could yell, you could send smoke signals, but that doesn't work very well. But if
mm,
you have electronics, and the thing is, if you're going to keep those electronics, the older the better. A lot of
mm,
older electronics is EMP resistant. But what I do, I keep some of mine inside of a Faraday cage. I have a box and they're all stuck in there. So if we do get an EMP, they'll survive. But it just, you could get into a lot of things depending on how much you want to think about it. You could be an extreme prepper, but I like to have a balance. And as you said, having friends, having people with similar interests, even if they don't live immediately in your area, at least there's somebody you can talk to. You can share the information. And a lot of times you can come up with ideas that you would never think of. People tell me that all the time when they ask about preps. And I say some of the things I say, and they're like, wow, I never thought of that. I said, yeah, the only reason I thought of it is because I was in that situation and I was like, wow, I need this or I need that. And I didn't have it. Then I learned my lesson. And
yeah,
that's why it's good to know people.
yeah. That's right. Yeah, it's always good to have a network. Um, yeah. All right. How about you, Nia?
Afterwards, honey. Okay. Um, yeah, so most of my experience, our experience, was living in the camping bus when we lived off the grid for it was about 18 months. And not technically a, hey, go watch your, okay. It was not technically like a natural disaster or anything like that, but this was during Honey Babes. Please. Okay. This was during the pandemic years, and it was just like a rough few years. And so really this was in part our solution to just getting through that time, housing wise. And so I got a chance to really put all this stuff into action there. Obviously not in a like survival disaster context, but just like a daily living situation with no hookups, no electric, no water. And so, if I had to summarize, again, and you guys mentioned a lot of great things that were on my list, but I would say conceptually, redundancy is one of the biggest things that I think is really important. So you need water, and you need food, and you need energy, be able to produce heat, cook food, sanitize water, all those kinds of things, generate light. So the more redundant you can be, the more ways that you can meet those few basic needs, the better. So like in our situation, we had a 2,000 watt solar generator, but it could also be charged like from the wall outlet. So if I was somewhere like at a park, I could pull that sucker. It's heavy. It's like 60 pounds, but you could wheel it over there and you could charge it up that way. I could charge it from a generator, which I had to do in the winter, or when it was raining a lot and there was no sun. So it could be charged multiple different ways, from solar, from regular 110 outlet, or with a generator. I think that's all the ways that we did it. But so, and then that thing charged all the phones, all the different lights. So you're talking about light sources. Again, I think you don't realize how dark things get. Especially if you're used to having ambient light, street lights on, the neighbor's porch light or whatever. Like when it is dark, it is dark. And when the sun goes down, it's dark. And so you don't want to be burning electricity, if you don't have to, running a generator or using up your solar battery or whatever it is at night, if you can avoid it. And so things like candles, but I used a lot of headlamps, rechargeable headlamps, which are super convenient because you don't have to hold on to it. Wherever you're looking, the light follows you. And so, I mean, I lived off of headlamps, basically all the time. And then flashlights, of course. And yeah, you guys covered a lot, but I was, the other thing that I don't have that I want to have is a ham radio. And I actually have the study guide, and I've been studying to get my license. And that's something that I want to do, finish up. I don't know if I'll finish it this year, but that was my original goal. Because at least there, again, you would be able to get and be able to hear information coming in, and you could potentially, put out information. And if you knew, again, in your network, if you had people that were a distance away, you'd just be able to communicate with them. So yeah, redundancy with water purification and ways to source water, I think, is probably the most important thing, having 4 or 5 different ways to collect and or sanitize it. If you have pets or animals, don't forget about them. Stocking up on their food and extra water for them is really important, because they're, again, in these situations, you're going to see stray animals running all over the place and all that kind of stuff. So, and I guess probably the other thing that I had down that maybe wasn't covered yet was just items to barter. So maybe, like, I don't drink coffee anymore, but I might still stock instant coffee to trade with somebody else who has something that I need. So always thinking about, again, like, who's going to be around you, what skill sets do they have versus what I have, because we can't all be great at everything. So knowing what I have that might be valuable to others, even things like alcohol, cigarettes. I know, like, these aren't things that any of us use, but again, in that situation, if you're hungry and somebody wants cigarettes, and they have food, it's like you might be able to trade it for something that you do want. So, or help with something that you can't do yourself. So I guess that's probably, without repeating what you guys said, what I had down.
Very good. Yeah, that's another couple of points I forgot to miss too, is you have to be able to trade with people. So whether it be cash or something of value, or food, or the last couple of years people went wild over toilet paper. So it could be anything that you can trade. But like when there's no power, for example, you can't just FPOS or use a credit card or anything. Digital doesn't work. So it's really good to have some kind of funds or something you can trade with. People have always traded. We've always, since day dot, for a millennia, we've always traded something. So it's always good to have something that you can use like that. Like Rick was saying too, so having CBs, like older technology on hand, is really good too. And that is more reliable, but you can keep them in a Faraday box. But also storage of batteries, like if you keep them separate, that'll no matter what happens, sort of thing, in a Faraday box or anything like that, would be well protected. But it's always good to have, if you have torches and things like that. Rechargeable is great, but if you can recharge them, but keep some batteries on hand too if you need to use torches and things like that. Yeah, definitely. A wet towel draped over a standing fan can really cool one down. Yeah, that's a good way to do it too. Again, water supply, like Nia said, is really, really important, and it has to be clean water supply, because you do need to drink water. When we were going through the quake, we didn't have like drinkable water. I went out and collected water from. Eventually went to. I'd travel a few kilometers away and carry a heap of water back for toilet flushing and things like that. But there's not going to be any vending machines. There's not going to be anything, like if there's no power, you can't access a vending machine. You can't access ATMs. You can't access anything, right? So having something that will filter water for you, like it could be like charcoal filters, or there are a few. There's also solar water filters that you can get as well. Camping equipment. Or if you can. Depends on where you are too. These are sort of things that you should sort of look at as well. Food and water supply is going to be your most important thing. So, okay, let's go through some of these comments and we'll see if we've got any more ideas as well. I think having prep to last at least a year is a good idea. Yeah. Saying EMP or solar flare happens, electronics will be dead and useless. That's true. Yeah, I mean, you may not have like I was talking about before, you may not have enough storage or space that you can store enough for a year's supply, like food. That would take up a lot of space. So you have to have equipment that will help you replenish and have the ability to replenish that fresh food supply. So hunting equipment is really important. And it can be just as, very simple stuff. Doesn't have to be a gun, you don't have to hunt deer or something, but just go fishing. It's very easy. You can even use a hand line. Is a very easy things that you can use that don't take up a lot of space and will last a very long time in storage as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a net is also handy if you want to catch some wildlife. Yeah. Maybe you want to catch a possum or duck or something like that. That's definitely something to have. And one thing that I have done some homemade EMP tests, and I've had some interesting results. I found that old electronics, especially tube type, anything that had tubes in it, is pretty much EMP proof. The only thing that's affected by EMP electronics wise is anything that's a semiconductor, especially MOSFETs, anything that uses MOSFET transistors. The BJT transistors are not as susceptible, but they can be damaged. But anything that's static sensitive is wiped out by EMP. So that means all computers, anything with a microprocessor in it is toast. And that would include cell phones and pretty much any electronics that you use. But old electrical items, like, for example, fans and a lot of lights and stuff like that, the old light bulbs, totally immune. It won't do anything to it. Now, if you have LED bulbs, they can be destroyed. And when it comes to cars, a lot of it depends on the type of car. because I've tried to EMP some of the ECMs in the 1990s cars, and they may shut off temporarily, but they do restart. So a lot of the electronics may have to be reset, and it will work. Anything that has an antenna that's used for communications is susceptible. So if you do use, like, for example, ham radio or CB or whatever, and it's semiconductor based, it's a good idea to keep it disconnected when you're not using it. And if possible, put it in the Faraday cage. An old safe works really well as a Faraday cage. All you have to do is get some copper wool or even steel wool and put it on the edge of the safe where the door closes up, and you have an instant Faraday cage. Because most of those safes, they have steel that's formed on the inside, even if it's a fire safe, and that will protect your electronics. But anything, portable devices, they're toast. And computers, laptops, and all that are toast. But if you can keep an extra one safe, and of course, if you know a disaster is coming, that's a different story. Just start throwing it into the safe and close the door. You can even make your own makeshift Faraday cage, but it's a little complicated. You have to have something that completely deflects a magnetic field, and it's really difficult to do unless you're very technical. But again, if you just have it in closed container, some people told me a trash can will work if you have one of the old metal trash cans and the lid fits tight enough. I don't know, because the device I was using wasn't that big, but I do know that my portable EMP device would fry pretty much anything that had a microprocessor in it. But old electronics, electrical items, they're fine. Electric motors, if you have an air compressor or you have any kind of electric tools, they'll be fine. The only thing is, the power grid is like a giant antenna. So if we do have a solar flare or EMP, it could overload the power grid, and it could blow up everything that you have connected to it. So that is a possibility, but it's highly unlikely that any large electrical items would be damaged by it.
Yeah, it depends too. Like if your house has a safety switch, like here in Australia, that your house, any sort of overload, that your house just turns off. It's got like a safety switch sort of thing. But anything that's plugged in, you run the risk of that. But you do get that. Older electronics are just far more reliable in those sort of situations, Okay, so my wife doesn't do camping. I just want to comment on that, because you'd be surprised, like in a situation like this, like my wife hates camping. She hates bugs. She hates going out. She doesn't like going outside to hang the washing on the line. She hates bugs that much, right? But, like in the situation, like she's absolutely champion. Like she is a little soldier, really. She'd go out on the bike. Like actually, there's another comment there. A bicycle would be handy. A bicycle is very handy in these situations as well, because you need transport, but you may not be able to access fuel. So a bicycle is very handy. We had bicycles when we were riding around trying to find food and water for months. It was very, very good. But, like, she doesn't like camping, as I say, but in that situation, she didn't complain once. We had cold showers. She had, like in winter in Japan, snowing. Okay. And we went out hunting for food every single day, food and water every single day, not one complaint at all. So, just because they don't like camping doesn't mean they won't be good in a disaster or a situation like that. So, have a bit of faith. You'd be surprised how strong you can be in a situation like that, and you won't even think about it. You just go out and do it, because that was one good thing is you know what you have to do. You have to find food, you have to find water, you have to do this, and you have to survive, sort of thing. So you just go and do it. All right. There's no thinking about it. Yeah.
Yeah, it becomes very simple. Like I could say that too. Like, your routine gets uber simplified, because it's just like, do I have enough clean water? Do I have enough power to cook? Do I have, enough light charged up for tonight? Do I have my diesel full up for the heater tonight? Like, it's just like, and then you're good. And then you sit down with a pencil and paper and do your writing, and it's like, you're not on the computer, and, so it's like, it's actually kind of nice in a way.
Yeah. It's kind of freeing.
As long as you're not in like, an actual crazy disaster.
Well, that was still like peace of mind wise for me. That was actually a kind of nice part of it. Like, I mean, we still had rolling earthquakes, aftershocks. Some of them were over 8 magnitude, like I said, and there's sirens going off all over the place. Emergency vehicles and that sort of thing going on. But the one thing that I had that it was simple. It was very, very simple. We both just got on the bikes in the morning and we went out. We went looking for food and water. That was it. That was all we had to do. It's a very, very simple thing to do. And granted, like being in Japan made it a lot easier because we didn't have to put up with looters. We didn't have to put up with any violence. We didn't have to put up with any stupid garbage that just makes things, a lot more difficult for everyone else, and including the emergency services who are trying to get things back to normal. So there was, that sort of made things a bit easier for us. But you'd be surprised just, when things are just down to the basic, okay, I need food and water today. That's it. You feel pretty good, even with everything else going on around you, because you know what you have to do.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, another thing to have is handy is bicycles. Any kind of transport that you don't need to fuel is going to make it a lot easier for you. And of course, being fit and healthy is going to make it a lot easier for you as well. It's going to be very difficult for anyone who is obese or sick or dependent on medications. If you need medications, you need to be stocking up on medications as well, because you don't know how long this sort of thing is going to last. But like I said, if you are dependent on medications or you are obese and you're not mobile, it's going to make it infinitely more difficult for you to survive a situation like that. Wolfpack hunts as one, demonstrating the power of unity. Yeah, and you'd be surprised, like in a family unit especially, or if you're in your network, you'd be surprised just how close you get to how unified you become when you have that same goal in mind for each day. You just go out and get your food and water, so it's really good. You do become an unstoppable force, you really do. I have one, but sadly have not been riding a bicycle. Yep, that's good. Who are the others? Okay, we've got this is one of yours, I guess, Rick. But yeah, I'm DC from DC Learning to Live, and this is Nia from Nia's Way. If you Nia has a great channel, you should go check it out. Actually, if you don't know Nia, my camera keeps freezing up, so I might just swap that over.
I was going to comment too about fire starting, and I saw a comment about, or a question coming up about a type of stove, and again with the redundancy thing, I think it's so important to not just have one way to start a fire or not one way to, I guess, cook. If you're relying on even just like a propane grill and you stock up on propane, that can be fine. But there may be an instance when you need to use that propane for something else, or it's not as efficient. So like firing up the whole grill just to make one meal for one person or two people might be wasting of energy, so that's something that I got really good at as well, is alternating back and forth between I did a lot of charcoal grilling, which you can kind of control the size, which is kind of nice in a big barrel grill. So you can do some indirect heat cooking as well. But even like in that example, I would cook my meal over the charcoal, but then I'd have a cast iron or a pot of water sitting on the other side, like just heating water for dishes, or heating water for washing our faces that night or something like that. So I'm like using my heat source for every possible thing I can think of. Even if I needed to like dry some towels, I would rig up something over the top. So like the rising heat, not that it's going to start on fire, but like once I'm done and shut the lid, things could dry over that, so like just really getting
Mm-hmm.
getting back in touch with like not wasting anything, especially when it comes to something expensive and like your heat source or your electricity. So I keep like a butane stove. I have a solar oven. I have solar water. They're like cylinders like this that you can boil water and sanitize water. You could make coffee or tea or reheat things in there. And then I have a propane cooker and a propane water heater, which is cool.
Mm-hmm.
It's a camping water heater. So you can just take like a 7-gallon, 5-gallon bucket, fill it with water, and run that through the propane heater and have a hot shower, or wash your dog or something like that. So like there's all kinds of cool stuff you can kind of endlessly collect. But again, having those multiple fuel sources, I think, is a good idea. And knowing how to start a fire, like with a magnesium stick, for example, and collecting the right fuel so that you could do it like that. I've never done it with a bow drill. Have you guys? But the hardest one I've ever done is magnesium stick.
I'll tell you, the easiest way is to use a cordless drill if you want to do it that way, because trying to do it with a bow drill is extremely difficult. However, a magnifying glass is quick and easy, and it requires absolutely no effort on your part. All you got to do is get some leaves and grass, a magnifying glass, put it in the sun, and that's it. As long as the sun is out, you got a fire. Also, steel wool is your friend if you want to start fires. Just get a bunch of steel wool, and all you need is a power source. You could use wires right off your car battery, or you could use a 9-volt battery. It's not hard to do. A pencil can also start a fire pretty easily. You could take the wires off your car battery, take the pencil, the graphite that's in it, and then just put a couple of pieces of wire across it, and that'll flare up. It'll make a really hot fire. So it's very easy to make a fire. I've even made a fire out of a broken projection TV. You just get the big plastic lens out of it and hold it over a bunch of twigs and stuff, and it'll catch fire. And I cook with biogas right now, so I never have to worry about running out of cooking fuel. As long as I got plant material and poop, I got all the gas I ever need. So that's not a problem. I can make charcoal. I do cook over wood from time to time. And when I trim my trees, I save all the thick branches. I have them sitting in my yard in different piles, and I can easily turn them into charcoal or just cook directly with them. Normally, when you want to cook, you've seen videos of mine cooking over a grill, primitive style. I just throw whatever plant material I have in there, wood, demolition wood or whatever, as long as there's no paint on it. You don't want to use old wood that has lead paint on it. That's very bad. But if you use wood, structural wood that's never been painted, and you can use cut tree branches or whatever, bunch of leaves. I use banana leaves and palm leaves because they burn really well. Put them on the bottom of the fire, and I just take a magnifying glass and just put it right on there and fan it with a piece of a leaf or a piece of cardboard. And once it fires up, it goes. You don't need any fuel. It just burns itself, and you let it burn. You keep adding to it. It's a good way to get rid of your trash, especially if you have a hurricane. They tell you not to burn your trash, but there's no law against cooking. So if anybody makes a complaint about it, you just get your burgers and your steaks, and you have your grill set up. You can burn all your waste, and at the same time you can cook. And the best way to do it, when you burn all your material, get the coals into a pile, and then you'll have nice charcoal that you can use, and it'll last sometimes for hours. You can continue to cook and warm your food, and as Nia was saying, you could dry clothes with it. There's a lot of things you can do. Obviously, you wouldn't put your clothes over a fire because, number one, they'd probably burn up, and number two, they'd smell like smoke. But once it's been turned into charcoal, there really is no smoke. It's just heat. So there's a lot of things that you can do. And like I said, again, practice now before the disaster hits. Use your free time to learn. And like you said, starting a fire, that's a great skill. Try some of the different methods. I may make some videos on the way that I start fires because I do it routinely when I have my barbecue. But yeah, the magnesium, you can buy those in the store. They have them at Harbor Freight, and you strike it together and it makes a spark. But the steel wool and a battery, that's a quick way to do it, and the magnifying glass. So if I were you, I'd get a magnifying glass, and I'd get some steel wool and a 9-volt battery, and just see how easy it is. All you need is some paper. We used to use newspaper, but it's hard to find a newspaper nowadays. But you can use your junk mail or whatever paper you can get your hands on. What I do, I hit the office park down the street. Huh?
Yeah, even
Yeah, you
dry
can
leaves
grass,
in
grass
brush.
and leaves. But a lot of
Mm,
times I'll hit the office park down the street and dig through the dumpster, get a bunch of paper, and then I'll use that because paper is a consistent way to burn stuff. The leaves
yeah,
and the grass, it varies on the species and what time of year it is, how wet it is. But paper, it pretty much burns every time. You know, you just get that magnifying glass, a couple of pieces of paper, and something to fan it with, and you'll have a fire within 30 seconds. No problem. It's so
yeah,
simple.
yeah. Yeah, there's a very easy ways to do that. Like in a magnifying glass, again, it takes up almost no space, for storage. You can just put that in, keep it in with your first aid kit or something like that, and it's very easy. And if you don't have a magnifying glass, like um, an old glass bottle will work the same way. Like the base of a glass bottle, you can still use the same as a magnifying glass to start a fire. Okay, especially some of those thicker old bottles. So any bit of rubbish like that, you can still find something that will magnify the sun into starting a fire as well.
Hmm.
There's actually very simple ways you can do it. Question: Does Lugol's iodine work to sterilize water? I've never used it, honestly. How about you guys?
I haven't. I don't think that it will work, but I don't know for sure. I'd have to look it up. I've used honey, literally every time I talk, she comes over here and starts singing. I'm like, the rest of the time when you guys are talking, she's quiet. Anyway, I've used these. Honey, please excuse me. These, they're called just potable aqua water purifying tabs. That's what I keep on hand.
Yeah.
And then there's the life straws, which those are the things that I would put like in a backpack or in something like in the car, and it's literally just a straw with a filter, and it's got like, I don't know, 500-gallon range or something like that. So sorry.
Yeah, a lot of them are quite strong too. So I think you got to be careful about the dosage as well with these iodine tablets. I know you can get, like here in Australia, we have a lot of places like my parents' house. They have large water tanks. They actually collect rainwater. That they use that water for everything. But you can get iodine tablets to sterilize the water. But like one tablet would do a full tank. So like it depends on, and that's like they're major industrial sized tanks. So it's not like you just get one tablet and just do like a jug of water sort of thing. So you have to make sure. I think you'd be careful not to overdose it too much, but be careful of the dosage. I think it does work though. But again, it's also going to depend on the supply, the source of your water. Like if you're out and find a natural stream of water, fresh water, you may not even need to sterilize it, but that might work. It's up to you. Did Rick ever get the hard drive working? Did you, Rick? You got it going?
I got it going. It was just a faulty. I was able to get it up and running. It just something with the controller was messed up. So I just swapped the board and I transferred the little EEPROM chip, and I was able to read my files without a problem.
Excellent. Very good. Yeah, the forest nurtures life. It really does. Nature, everything in nature does nurture life, which is, just crazy why we demonize it so much, the sun. And, it really does support life and being outside, being connected to nature and everything. Hello, Booby Goats. Good to see you, mate. Sigs and weed. I heard an old tube type yeast from my dad. I think that works. I'm not sure what that is, but yeah. Stock lowish denomination bullion. Yeah, that's a good idea too. Low denomination bullion is very tradable. Anything that's tradable, you can trade anything that people need. Okay, so it can be money, gold, silver, God's money. Okay, cash, or just something that's usable. It can be as simple as toilet paper. It can be as simple as extra tools, or trade. Like labor. You can trade labor too, so you can like do some work for someone, and they can give you food in exchange, for example. So these are all things that you can still trade your time for food, water, or whatever as well. So just be prepared to do things that you may not normally do. Forest hums with ancient secrets. It does indeed. Living archive of time, the river, ceaseless journey. Yeah, that's really nice. Profound. Yeah, you're right. The trees have profound wisdom. Nature does. The herb has entered the chat. Okay, I have several to honor the earth. Exactly. If you are prepared to go looking for your food, there's a lot of it depends on where you are too. Like location has a lot to do with your ability to find food. Like for Rick, example, may not be a lot of fruits and berries and things like that, except for his garden. But there's a lot of iguana and ducks and things like that. So you can find food wherever you are. Really, most people anyway. It should be like that. Yeah, but like Rick said, that practice for these situations does help. It does. Like if you can practice these skills, it'll make it much easier when these events do happen. But you'd be surprised what you can do when these things happen as well.
Yeah. But if you think about like military training or any organization, they always have some type of training program. It's kind of silly for people not to try when times are good, because why would you wait until the last minute? And I never understood this idea of waiting to the last minute and then struggling. It's better to practice ahead of time. And then that way you can correct the situation, because what are you going to do if you need something and nothing is available? Now you're stuck. You can't. I mean, if you're missing one part, let's say that the generator won't start because it needs, I don't know, an ignition module. Where are you going to get it from? You're not going to find it. Right. If your tire is flat in your car, I mean, what are you going to do?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, you have to have a minimum amount of skills to make these situations easier. Like I can maintain my car. I can do a lot of different things. Same like Rick and Nia, and these are necessary skills just for life. I think it's not just about when you need it the most. But no one's coming to save you in these situations. This is the thing. Right. No one is coming to help you. I mean, you might have your network and they'll come and help you, sort of thing. But you need to help them too, and you need to support the people around you. Like when the earthquake happened for us in Japan, we didn't have anyone coming to help us. We were somewhat prepared because we always stored like bottled water. We always had a little bit of extra food, and we always had something we could trade. Like we always keep money, so that we always pay cash for everything. We always have. That's just the way we are, because you go digital and all sorts of other problems happen. All right. And in this situation, it's perfect because you couldn't access digital for a start. You tend to think that, okay, government agents will come out and help, all these emergency services and so on. But they've got other things to do as well. Like in this situation, they had to help people that were homeless, that were in shelters. They had to try and get everything back on. There were people that needed emergency, like airlifting back to hospitals in places that, needed, urgent medical care, things like that. The military was there. They were trying to rebuild and trying to get everything on that. Basically, we were left to our own devices to find food, water, and everything else. And like even the embassy, the Australian embassy, they never even came. They would call us when we had phone service, like a couple of weeks later, but they never came to help us either. All they did, they offered us 2 iodine tablets because the radiation might make us sick. That was it. All right, like an iodine tablet's not going to save your life, in that situation, because we had radiation from Fukushima coming up, because that we were very close to that as well, not too far anyway. So no one's coming to save you in these situations, so you have to have a certain amount of skill sets that you can use to either trade or use to make your time in that situation more comfortable and more survivable. So I don't understand why people would shy away from trying to learn a new skill anyway. The more skills you have, the better, the easier it's going to be.
Yeah, look at what just happened in Hawaii. Look at like all those. I mean, that's the most recent thing I can remember, and it's like, where was the help? It's like people were
Right.
just totally on their own, and for weeks,
Yeah.
and so, yeah.
Yeah, that's basically what happens. That the emergency services get deployed to try and rebuild everything and get power back on and everything else going on. They don't have time to come out to every individual and make sure that you have food and water.
Right. Well, another thing, like when there's a disaster, one of the jobs that I do, I have people I work with that do disaster cleanup. So a hurricane or other disaster in my area just means that I'm going to have more work. So it actually, in the long run, it's a good thing. It's very important for me to be prepared, because if I'm going to be working, I need to have what I need to be healthy. I mean, obviously, as you said, if a person is unhealthy, they're not going to be able to do anything. They're going to totally dependent on everybody else. But in my case, I make sure that I have food supplies and whatever. So when I have to go out and do that work, then at least I'm ready to go. And again, Nia had a good idea about getting ham license. I used to be into ham radio myself. I kind of got out of it because my equipment failed and I just didn't feel like messing with it. I mean, you can see what's left of one of my radios. It's basically destroyed. But being able to communicate, that's a really good thing. When everything else has failed, that's always the thing that works. So it really is important. Get yourself in shape. Make sure you have the supplies you need. Make sure that you are going to be able to help yourself before. Then that way, if you're going to help others, because as you said, they're not coming. They're not going to help you. They always help the special interests first, and then they go down the line. And if you happen to still be there and still alive, then you might get some help. And you know how it is with the government. They only give you just enough to somewhat survive. They'll never give you what you need to thrive.
No, that's right. Exactly right. And if you are dependent, and trust me, like I've been there, like I've been bedridden for years, and I know what it's like to be dependent. It's not something you want. But if you are obese or dependent in any way, stuck at home, and you don't have anyone around you, you don't have a network that people that know that you are there, your chances are very, very slim, of surviving these sort of things, and they do happen. Whether you think it's never going to happen to you or not, these things do happen. A good brand of portable water filter. Do you guys know any?
Just if you're meaning portable, like the Life Straw is the one that I buy, and they're just straws with filters on them, and you can throw them in a purse, a bag, a backpack. So those would be probably the most portable ones that I'm aware of that I have.
Yeah. How about you, Rick? Do you know any good ones?
Know any what?
Portable brand of portable water filter. Do you know any good ones?
That's a good question. There used to be one, I can't remember the brand name, where you would crank it. It was like a portable reverse osmosis unit. I don't remember what the brand was, and I did have them, but I haven't really used them because the well water I have here is pretty decent. But there is, I'm trying to remember what the brand name was. This was years ago, but they did have a reverse osmosis, and it had a high pressure pump, and you had to kind of like, pedal it like a bicycle. You'd hold it down with your knee, and you do that, and it worked, and it gave you clean water. But I'll have to look that up and see.
Yeah, that's a good idea actually. If you could get a portable like reverse osmosis, would be fantastic. Especially if you get your hand wind it like that. It's pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
I remember my mother-in-law gave me a charge. Like you're talking about being able to charge your phones and things like. My mother-in-law gave me a little hand. There's a little thing in Japan. You can just plug your phone into, and you can hand wind the charge the phone. But you know, you'd be winding that damn thing all day long, and it wouldn't do very much. So, quite a good one. Aren't you in Florida, Rick? Yes, yes, he is, and he's doing pretty well. Airstream trailer would be kind of like a Faraday box. Yeah, they're pretty good actually. There's a lot of old caravans made out of aluminium. Actually, Lisa Wanderous, she's another channel here in Australia. She has an aluminium caravan she lives in, but she says it's fantastic for sleeping too, actually, because it keeps out those frequencies and things. Question, Coach, I know you use a butane stove in your kitchen. Yes, I do. Yes, I recommend having these like little butane cooktops because one, they're very portable. So if you have to leave your situation, you can take these with you. It's very easy to store, and yeah, you can buy the gas tanks, the small gas tanks, and you can store quite a lot of them as well, and they last quite well. So yeah, I do recommend them very much. Any camping equipment, I think that it doesn't take up too much space for storage. I think it's very useful. So it can be anything as small as like pocket knives and things like that, and those little multi-tools, to like a little butane stove, and things like tripods that you can hang food over a campfire or anything like that is going to be very, very useful. Fishing equipment, again, also like nets, hand lines, things like that. These are very, very useful things that don't take up much space for storage. Depending on your situation, if you've got like a big garage that you can store a heap of stuff, then yeah, go to town, store as much as you want. But if you don't, and it's stuff that you need to carry as well, stuff that you can easily load into a car and not take up too much space, and because you may have to relocate, like I said, is going to be very easy and very useful. Question also, did notice communities forming up again, veering away from networks such as, yeah, that's true. Also did notice communities forming up again. That's, that having a network, people don't understand it. It's like very important for, I think it's not just emergencies, but, quality of life too, having a network of people that you can, get information or trade in be it skills or anything else. It's just useful to have, okay, there you go. Yeah, reflecting those sort of things are always good. Speaking of obesity, I've been working at home for a family of a few cats. Most of them are extremely obese. Meat flavored cereal, dry food. No, yeah. Poor things. Okay, guys, you still got a bit of time. I think we might wrap it up, and we'll let these good people go.
Mm-hmm.
If you have any, just trying to get through some of these comments, guys, trying to catch up. If there's any questions, if you've got any questions, please, get them in quick. Otherwise, we're going to head off.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think iodine can't really hurt, but again, dosage is, you have to be careful of as well. So just be careful of that. I'm getting 1, 2, very good. Microburst. All right, guys. If there's no more questions, I think we'll leave it there today. But I thank you all very much for joining us. I hope these tips were useful and help you, because these really are possibilities. Like you just don't know what's going to happen. Okay, honestly, you really don't know, and you give yourself the best. I mean, by being prepared for anything, you're giving yourself the best chance of not only doing it comfortably, but surviving and getting through situations like that. And like we said, you don't know what the situation might be. Okay. If you have a look at the thumbnail for this video, then you can see that some things can be pretty bad. All right. If you have any more tips or questions for any of us, please leave them in the comments. We really appreciate any tips and advice that you might have as well. Any last words of wisdom there, Rick?
Well, all I can say is if you want to be prepared, make sure you practice and try to get to know people that are into the prepping scene, because they'll think of a lot of things that you haven't thought of. So again, the time to start is now. Don't wait until things are really desperate and you don't have a lot of options. Start now, and it'll also kind of help, I think, calm you down, because I know in my case, I live in a dangerous area with hurricanes, and they don't really bother me as much as they did when I was younger. I guess after you've been through enough of them and you know what you need, you kind of know what to expect. I mean, I've gotten to the point when I actually know when they're coming or not. I can look at the weather and determine what's going to happen. And again, if you want to keep your stress level down, it's always a good idea to prepare. And there's nothing wrong with having extra of what you need, because if it's something you use, you're eventually going to use it up. It's also a good inflation hedge, especially in the world that we live in now with the central bankers constantly inflating the currency. If you can get a good deal on something you need, load it up. All you have to do is find a way to preserve it, and then it's going to be to your benefit. So there really is no downside to using common sense preparations. Now, you could go overboard and be like some of these people that have turned into, they have a bunker and they're going to go underground when the world ends and all that. And that kind of stuff usually doesn't end well. But having a little extra and getting to know people that you can help and that can help you, that's always a good thing. And again, having things that you can trade with, that's a good thing. And especially don't get upset about it. Try to use logic and try to use your experience to reduce the stress, because if you're going to be constantly worrying about something, it's not going to do you any good. Just try to think of what could go wrong and then think about what the possibilities are. And generally, they're not as bad as we think they're going to be. So if you think things are going to be really bad, they may not be that bad. But don't be complacent and go, well, I'll wait until the last minute and then take care of it then. Because if you do that, you will fail, guaranteed.
Yeah, good tips there, Rick. Especially, stay calm, especially when the situation does occur. A calm mind is so much easier to get things done as well. You think a lot better when you're not stressed, you're not panicking. Don't go into that panic mode. Just try and relax, think about the situation, and then think about what's best for that situation. How about you, Nia?
Yeah, I second all of that. I think having a plan, even if you don't have all of the supplies or all of the things that you could want or need or think you have enough redundancy and like all the stuff we've been talking about, even just starting to think through, okay, what would I do if it was this situation? And I think having a plan for staying and having a plan for relocating is a good place to start. It's like kind of like those fire drills we used to do in elementary school or whatever, like you guys have been saying too, like practice, even just knowing, okay, here's where we would meet. Like, my fiance is at work, so we talk about that. It's like, what if something happened and you were at work, and we couldn't communicate, how would we get back together? How would I know you're safe? Where would, if we had to leave here, where would we meet up, and all that kind of stuff. So like just starting to talk to your family members about, hey, if this happened, or hey, we got stranded, what would we do? And then even if you don't have in your possession all of the things, you've still set out that intention of just getting your mind wrapped around that situation, so that when you find yourself there, you're likely to be much more resourceful than you would have been if it just totally, completely caught you off guard. So do as much as you can, but don't go out and hoard buy. Like I've done that in the past where I'm like, let me put it all on the credit card, and like, that's probably not the smartest thing to do. So do what you can, do a little bit with what you have, and building skills and learning how to be resourceful, I think, with what you already have is a big important point too. You don't have to have all the super fancy gear
and don't forget, credit cards don't always work, so have cash too. You're going to need it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, great tips now. Having a meeting point is great too if you're separated. Like when that's what happened to us actually during the earthquake. My wife was at work and I was sort of on my way to my next place, so I had to try and find her. Like in trying to get through emergency, traffic, people panic buying, everything like that. It was like a Hollywood movie. The ground's still shaking. I had the ground opening up underneath us. We had sinkholes opening up, all sorts of things going on. So it was lucky I had a 4-wheel drive. But, these are situations where it's good to have a plan if you are separated, to have a meeting point. It's difficult if one doesn't drive or, there's no transport or anything like that. You also have to be prepared to, change the plan on the go as well. Just be prepared that, even the best laid plans don't always work, or it just depends on the situation. May have to change because of the situation. Okay. So, just be prepared for that sort of thing. But it is good to have a plan at least, and practice, like Nia said, not just practice the skills, practice, like if you have to relocate, practice having to relocate, practice packing the car, practice, where the equipment's going to go, how quick you can load your car and get out of there is going to help as well. So if you can, anyway. Anyway, guys, we'll leave it there. Again, if you have any other more practical tips, leave them in the comments for everyone to read. We'd love to hear any more tips you may have, and any questions, do the same. And we might do this again sometime, because it's something we could always talk about. There's always more that we can do to try and prepare for these sort of situations as well. So, all right, guys, thank you all for joining us. Hope you all have a great day, and we'll see you soon.